Good afternoon to you. 507 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Ben Weingarten from Real Clear Investigations is here as Joe Biden says he's had it with Israel. No more help. We're done. More on that in a moment. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump, just moments ago, stepping up to a microphone outside of that courthouse in Manhattan. Here's what he had to say. Take a listen.
Thank you very much. Everybody saw what happened today. I don't think we have to do any explaining. I'm not allowed to anyway, because this judge is corrupt. He's a corrupt judge. This judge, what he did and what his ruling was, is a disgrace. Everybody saw what happened today. He's a corrupt judge, and he's totally conflicted. And I got to get back on the campaign trail. I'm not supposed to be here. We are so innocent. There's never been anything like it. Read every single analyst, legal analyst. I'm innocent, and I'm being held in this court with a corrupt judge who's totally conflicted. Take a look at his conflict. It's a disgrace to the city of New York, to the state of New York, and to the country. Thank you very much.
That's all he has to say. A terse statement from President Trump. He's done. And look, he wanted to say more, because earlier there was a motion to have the gag order amended to allow him to respond to the slanders that were taking place on the stand over the course of this, especially out of the mouth of Stormy Daniels, Stephanie Clifford this week. And the judge denied modifying the gag order. So they're free to make body blows on him, and he's tied up. He can't speak about it, or else he's going to be penalized up to and including throwing him in jail. He's already been hit with thousands of dollars in fines, which to a billionaire probably seems like a very small sum, but I think $10,000 this week. Beyond that, Trump's trying not to be fined anymore, and he's also trying to keep himself from being sent to jail, so he's not really saying much. I think that explains why we got a short statement just now. He wanted to say a lot more, couldn't, because he's having every aspect of his constitutional rights foreclosed on. And it's amazing. It's just amazing what's happening as a Biden donor suffocates his ability to respond to all these attacks. Now, the voters are seeing through it. The poll numbers are definitely, I mean, in a demented way, that it's almost better. And it's like if the outcome you prefer is that Trump win this election, this is the thing that's helping him accrue strength. The more ridiculously and cartoonishly tyrannical they are, the more you can detect who's on the side of justice here. And so Trump, again, with a very short statement, uncharacteristically so. He's issued a bunch of short statements relatively, in front of the court, both in morning and evening. But this evening statement from him barely gets a few words out. Says it's totally corrupt. Says the judge is totally conflicted. The Biden donor with the daughter, who's an active Democrat working in Democrat politics as an activist. This is remarkable. And he can't remark about it. Trump was outside the courthouse this morning and had some things to say. Let me see if I can. We'll just focus on what he had to say about Biden. He was reacting to this CNN thing last night. CNN's Aaron Burnett, one of the only people to even get Biden to speak to her. Very few interviews for Joe. He doesn't do them. The White House has been trying to stop him from doing them. And it wasn't that long either. The CNN interview, I think it was like 16 minutes long. It was a very short interview with the President of the United States. You'd think they would do, as Larry King used to say, the full hour, for the full hour. They weren't doing that on CNN last night. 16 minutes, that's about all the time they could get out of him. I guess the drug cocktail only lasts so long. Trump this morning outside of the courthouse had something to say about Biden's attitude towards Israel. Take a listen.
What Biden is doing with respect to Israel is disgraceful. If any Jewish person voted for Joe Biden, they should be ashamed of themselves. He's totally abandoned Israel, and nobody can believe it. I guess he feels good about it because he did it as a political decision. You have to do the right decision, not the political decision, but he did a very bad thing.
He made a political decision. He's withholding support to Israel in order to win votes in Dearborn. Trump's right about that. He's very right about that. That's the whole idea here. In fact, on this issue of Biden and the way he's now cutting off Israel from arms, here is a little bit of that exchange last night, again, between Aaron Burnett and Joe Biden.
Israel is striking Rafah. I know that you have paused, Mr. President, shipments of 2,000-pound U.S. bombs to Israel due to concern that they could be used in any offensive on Rafah. Have those bombs, those powerful 2,000-pound bombs, been used to kill civilians in Gaza?
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond.
You know, Israel's been dropping notifications on Rafah, leaflets, and sending messages in every possible communications method they can muster to tell, whatever civilian population exists there, you need to clear the area because we're coming in for Hamas. And in fact, is giving them specific directions on where to go, which is about a pretty sure sign that they're not intending to attack the place that they're sending them. Like, hey, go there so we can root Hamas out of Rafah. It's pretty generous for the country to do. Israel's been doing that. Biden's saying, don't you dare. Don't you dare take out the force that's been terrorizing Israel with a plan to wipe out the Jews in Israel for as long as it's existed. And then, of course, had conducted that horrific October 7th terror attack. Biden's telling them, right as they're on the verge of defeating Hamas, you don't get to. In fact, we're going to cut you off.
Attacks like came out of the Middle East recently, but it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah, artillery shells.
Yeah, listen to how sleepy he sounds. By the way, we can barely keep it together. Biden also bragged about holding up a shipment of arms to Israel. This was reported earlier in the week that this was going on, and there wasn't official administration confirmation. It was all a big mystery, and now Biden is now openly confirming it and bragging about how he's withholding congressionally signed into law arms shipments to Israel. And the obvious implication here is he's doing it for politics. He's trying to convince especially the fringiest elements of his base to support him in November by holding up this weapons shipment to Israel.
I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers. We're not walking away from Israel's security. We're walking away from Israel's ability to wage war in those areas.
So it's not over your red line yet?
We're walking away from their ability to wage war, to defend themselves, to root out the terror threat.
To wage war in those areas.
So it's not over your red line yet?
Not yet, but we've held up the weapons. We've held up the one shipment as an old shipment was designed for. We held that up.
I don't even understand what he said in some of those words. We held it up. We held it up. We held it up. Now, just thought experiment. You had Trump saying something like that about arms to Ukraine. He's on audio. We held it up. We held up the shipment. We're not sending them over. Not until they investigate Joe. If any of that, boom, that's the whole. I mean, they did it anyway. They impeached Trump for holding up aid to Ukraine. By the way, Trump was hot on the trail of a very legitimate story, which is the effort to cover up Joe Biden's family enriching itself at the expense of U.S. foreign policy, specifically in Ukraine. But, impeach him for that. But Biden gets to brag about holding up shipments of aid to Israel, which, of course, he's doing for electoral advantage. Now, Biden, a couple years back, was asked about this prospect, because every so often it pops up in Congress. Democrats love this. Cutting off military aid to Israel. Cutting it off. So in 2019, here's what Joe Biden told PBS about this.
But the idea that we would cut off military aid to an ally our only true ally in the entire region is absolutely preposterous. It's just beyond my comprehension anyone would do that.
It's preposterous. It's beyond my comprehension that anyone would do that. Anyone would do that. Nowadays, he doesn't have any comprehension. So I guess it's fine. It's like now it's perfectly fine. On that CNN interview, Aaron Burnett said, "Hey, all across the country, you've got young people on these campuses, pushed on by Obama alums who are a part of these left-wing billionaire foundations all across the country organizing this, who are calling you Genocide Joe. Genocide Joe. Have you heard that message?"
And Mr. President, I had signs at college campuses. Some say Genocide Joe. Any of us that have gone to those campuses, sometimes we hear that chant. Do you hear the message of those young Americans?
Absolutely, I hear the message. Look, two things. First of all, there's a legitimate right to free speech and protest. There's a legitimate right to do that, and they have a right to do that. There's not a legitimate right to use hate speech. There's not a legitimate right to threaten Jewish students. There's not a legitimate right to block people access to class. That's against the law. That's against the law. And if you look at the data, these demonstrations are real, but they're not nearly, I mean, look, and I made a speech on the Holocaust the other day. Mm-hmm. And I pointed out that, it took 7 decades to get to the place where after the Holocaust occurred, and there's still anti-Semitism. Look what's happened in 7 weeks, 70. I mean, what's happening? Everybody's sort of forgotten about what happened in Israel.
It's so senseless. Now he's like trying to do some pandering to Jewish supporters. Like, oh, look, it's not. He can barely speak. He can barely speak. And it's not working. That's the other piece. Here's an example of why it's not working. You know the guy Michael Rappaport, the actor, is he a comedian too? I guess comedian, actor and comedian Michael Rappaport. He hates Trump. He spent years hating Trump. In fact, he released a video today. Was it today that this video came out? Yeah, today, where he's talking about how much he hates Trump, but that Joe Biden, well, he's really messed everything up. Take a listen.
Smoking Joe Biden. Cadaver Joe Biden. You know who I am. You know my work. I'm the one who I'm the one who invented stain Donald Trump. Pig Donald Trump. That's me. That's my work. I didn't ask for a thank you. I didn't ask for an invite.
I didn't ask for a thank you.
And anybody.
I came up with vulgar terms for Trump and nobody ever thanked me.
Shows up at the White House these days. I did it for the love. I did it for the love because I couldn't stand that. And you dumb old you have the you bat old you. You're not sending weapons to Israel during a war while American hostages and hostages from 22 countries are still in that. You're not sending weapons now, you dumb Let me tell you something. I never, ever, ever thought I would say this, okay? But I could promise you this right now. Smoking Joe Biden, Cadaver Joe Biden, me, Michael Rappaport, I'm not voting for you. You're not getting my vote. And plenty of us also ain't voting for you, you. I said it once, and I'll say it again. This is why voting for stain Donald Trump, pig Donald Trump, is on the table.
It's on the table. So Michael Rappaport has gone from the guy who wanted credit for inventing all sorts of swear words to talk about Trump is so disgusting, blah, blah, blah. Now he's saying Trump back on the menu, folks. Trump is back on the menu. Way to go, Joe. Way to go, Cadaver Joe, says Michael Rappaport. Trump himself has something to say about all this. He released a video today as well, separate from his never-ending court proceedings, about Joe Biden and what he's done to our country. I'll play.
Crooked Joe Biden would say constantly that he ran because of Charlottesville. We know that's not true. And in any case, he's done a really terrible job because Charlottesville is like a peanut compared to the riots and anti-Israel protests that are happening all over our country. Right now, it's a disaster. There's never been a time like it in the United States of America, and it's Crooked's fault because he sends the wrong message every single time. And that includes what happened with Russia and Ukraine. That includes October 7th. And that certainly includes a bad message on inflation, where he has launched inflation at levels never seen before.
Yeah, he went on in that audio released today online on social media. He said if Jewish people vote for Joe Biden, they need their head examined. He said, coming up, we're going to talk to Ben Weingarten, editor-at-large at Real Clear Investigations. We'll ask him what he thinks of Joe Biden's latest effort to stop Israel from defending itself after Biden funded Iran and the terror attacks in the first place. Stay with us.
I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers. We're not walking away from Israel's security. We're walking away from Israel's ability to wage war in those areas.
So it's not over your red line yet?
Not yet, but we've held up the weapons. We've held up the one shipment as an old shipment. It was designed. We held that up.
We held that up. We held that up. The old man kept repeating to CNN last night, confirming that the Biden administration is trying to stop Israel from finishing off Hamas in Gaza. For more on everything that's transpiring here, I want to bring in Ben Weingarten now. He's the editor-at-large for Real Clear Investigations and the author of American Ingrate, Ilhan Omar and the Progressive Islamist Takeover of the Democratic Party. Ben, good to have you with us, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
How do you process what we heard from Joe Biden last night?
Well, what I would say is that contrary to the conventional wisdom that suddenly now Joe Biden has engaged in a betrayal of Israel, and by the way, the Americans who are also being held in Hamas's clutches and America's national interest.
Yeah.
There has been a steady, concerted effort over the nearly 40 years of the Biden presidency to aid, abet, and enable Iran and all of its proxies on the one hand, and put the screws to Israel and our other traditional Sunni Arab partners and allies in the region on the other, all in a bid to make Iran and their proxies the strong course and counterbalance our traditional friends, allies, and partners. The consequences of that are legion, all of them disastrous. October 7th is a direct consequence of it. The 300-plus projectiles lobbed at Israel, including ballistic missiles and drones, is another part of it. The well over 100 attacks on American assets, personnel, and facilities post-October 7th are the poisonous fruits of it. And so the notion now that withholding the weapons, while at the same time out of one side of their mouth, the Biden administration says never again, we have to honor the lives of the 6 million Jews slaughtered in the Holocaust. But on the other hand, we're going to deny Israel the weapons to destroy one of several enemies that pose an existential threat, and engaged in a Holocaust in a day on October 7th, we're going to deny them the weapons. As stunning as a rupture in the relationship as that represents, there's been a steady drumbeat of efforts leading up to it, and it's completely consistent with a policy that effectively has made the Biden administration the world's leading state sponsor of the world's leading state sponsor of jihad,
Such a good
Iran,
point.
and its proxy Hamas.
Such a good point. And this is one of the elements I've been trying to emphasize too, which is, and of course, never any mainstream media consideration about this at all, but the tens of billions of dollars that Biden has uncorked for Iran just over the course of these few short years that he's been president of the United States, following the tradition of the Democrat president before Obama, who kept sending money to Iran and relieving them of sanctions, enabling Iran now, this Biden is, to export all of its oil to China, thus enriching Iran and powering their terror machine, which includes Hamas. We don't get here unless Biden made all of those decisions, do we, Ben?
It's absolutely right. The billions of dollars in unenforced oil sanctions are a part of it. The letting of sanctions lapse and embargoes lapse on highly dangerous weapons that Iran has had access to and proliferated. And let's not forget, what did the Biden administration do right after October 7th? First of all, we saw reporting indicating that Israel planned to engage in massive strikes against Hezbollah, which to the north really poses a far more substantial threat than Hamas. It's a much more formidable adversary. The Biden administration told Benjamin Netanyahu and the leadership in Israel, stand down, do not strike and quote unquote escalate against Hezbollah. Consequently, you never hear about this in the media either. Tens of thousands of Israelis from northern Israel have been rendered refugees in their own country, unable to return to their homes because of the threat Hezbollah poses. Here's another way in which the Biden administration aided Iran after October 7th. Beyond letting those sanctions waivers persist, enabling Iran to access the billions of dollars, which there's big controversy over, the administration also strained to de-link Iran from Hamas and the attack. And then last but not least, most recently, of course, we saw this unprecedented invasion of Israel's airspace and attack on Israel by Iran. And what did the Biden administration say? It said, take the win. Imagine an administration saying, take the win, if, let's say, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union from Cuba launched a barrage of missiles at the U.S. and they just happened to miss and they hit off the shore of Miami. Do you think they would that an American leader or any of our allies would say, take the win? And would you say, well, no, America's commitment is ironclad? That's what it says to Israel. But really, what the commitment is to quote unquote Israel's defense. And cynically, what the administration did was say, look, U.S. and our Sunni Arab partners provided you with defense. Don't strike back. We'll defend you next time as well. But what they're doing is restraining, always restraining Israel, and consequently the existential threats to Israel grow. It could potentially be obliterated, and America is going to face the consequences of that too, because Israel is a force multiplier. And that was the whole point of what Trump tried to do: strengthen Israel, strengthen the Sunni Arab partners so that they could police the region and balance out the world's leading state sponsor of jihad, so America wouldn't have to be engaged.
Right. But the key point I think that you've made so many times here, and I really appreciate this, is not just that these are existential threats to Israel. They are existential threats that were financed by the United States. That's the part that is just absolutely mind-blowing, and here we are.
Financed by the United States to try and keep Hamas alive, to create a Palestinian Arab terror state that would threaten myriad October 7th against Israel, to protect Qatar, a major non-NATO ally, which the Biden administration elevated to a major non-NATO ally, which harbors the leaders of Hamas in exile, in luxury, in Doha. And think about this. I mean, we are essentially allied and partnered with the entire terror axis that Iran has enabled in that region. And let's not forget, it's not just Hamas that has American blood on its hands, but it's Iran dating back to the revolution in 1979, dating back to the barracks bombings in Beirut on American troops, a U.S. embassy in Lebanon as well, the Khobar Tower bombings in Saudi Arabia, and then all those American troops hit by IEDs in Afghanistan and Iraq. Those were Iran-crafted IEDs, and they've plotted on our soil and against our leaders in America as well. So they are our enemy. They've been our sworn enemy from the start. They're the biggest jihadist backers in the world, and the Biden administration is sided with them against our chief ally in the region and a bulwark against the Islamic supremacist menace for Western civilization.
So we're talking to Ben Weingarten with Real Clear Investigations. Ben, when we talk about the posture towards Iran that the Democrats have adopted, as I mentioned earlier, you can't help but also mention Obama's role in all of this. I was reading an excellent piece earlier this week in Tablet magazine, which was pointing out that the campus uprisings we're seeing all over the country in support of Hamas, against Israel, certainly against the United States, they're taking down American flags and raising Palestinian flags, is being organized in part by a constellation of left-wing nonprofits, to include places like the Tides Foundation, which include among their board members all sorts of Obama administration alums. These are like Obama world has their fingerprints all over this. How much more should we be focused on Obama's role, if any, in the midst of all of this chaos?
The Biden administration should be understood as the third term of the Obama-Biden administration. Barack Obama, remember his first speech overseas, he gave a speech to the Arab world, and he invited, among others, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the tip of the spear of the Sunni jihadist forces in the world. And then on the other hand, of course, the Iran nuclear deal, so-called, which, as you noted, flooded tens of billions of dollars into their coffers, legitimized their nuclear weapons programs, actually pledged American protection of those programs, while the administration did everything it could to thwart Israel to the extent Israel wanted to sabotage those programs. There's a consistent thread that runs through it, which is make Iran the strong horse, punish our traditional allies and partners to realign that region. And there are any number of reasons why, to go into the psychology of it. There's the oppressed oppressor worldview aspect of this, global equity on the one hand. There is the belief, the naive and absurd belief, that essentially Israel is the chief accelerant to volatility in the region. So if pesky Israel would just stand down and let itself be obliterated, essentially, then somehow you'd have peace between America and these other countries. There's also the belief, again, in this sort of global equity view, that somehow the West are the oppressors and they are the aggressors, and this is getting our just comeuppance, essentially. And then there are more cynical aspects as well to prioritizing Iran and the Sunni Islamists as well over our traditional allies and partners. But to your point, the broader point is that the left and the Islamic supremacists have an unholy alliance. It's been building for years. You can see it in the personnel in the Obama-Biden administration and in the Biden administration, and this is basically all Obama holdovers, essentially, in key positions, before you even get to the Rob Malley-ites of the world, the people who may well be agents of influence on behalf of our adversaries. And you have the leftists and you have the cynics, and they are all wedded to the same cause, which is essentially knock America down several pegs and affirmative action for our worst adversaries.
Can you talk about the terrible political balancing act Biden's undertaking right now? He's headed into an election. It seems crystal clear that to the extent that he's cutting off these weapons, it's designed to try and win some votes in Dearborn, Michigan. What do you make of that cynical play?
He's between Barack and a hard place, as I like to say, which is that on the one hand, all of the progressive energy ascendant in the Democrat Party is the pro-Hamas part of the party, essentially. And again, it's the radical progressives on the one hand, and it's the Islamic supremacists on the other. And to your point, that makes a substantial impact in places like Dearborn, Michigan, and in Minnesota and elsewhere as well. But on the other hand, if you look at polling in America, Americans broadly still stand with our traditional allies like Israel, still believe that Israel should finish the job with Hamas and obliterate it, and that what occurred on October 7th is an utterly horrible abomination that should have never been allowed to transpire. So he's trying to balance out, on the one hand, where the energy in his party is, and it's loud, it's in your face, it's on college campuses, it knows how to get media attention, and it has loud and in-your-face representatives in Congress as well. But on the other hand, where the American people are is not with them. And so that balancing act, for this election at least, is how do you balance out the Dearborn vote on the one hand with our traditional Democrat voters on the other hand, which includes Jews who would never in a million years have voted Republican under other circumstances, but which now potentially could switch, and that really could be decisive, say, in Pennsylvania or in Arizona or Nevada or a Michigan or a Wisconsin, for example. So this may be a losing political ploy that they are engaged in among their own voters, but I believe that it goes beyond the politics and just this election cycle, and it goes to an ideology, a deep-seated policy, an anti-American one, ultimately, that they're wedded to. And they might lose this time because of it, but ultimately I think they believe that's where the votes are, and the cohorts that they're going to lose ultimately aren't going to be decisive going forward.
And what we're talking about here is a party that's beholden to extremists within its own ranks. Biden has constantly projected that this is some sort of that's right-wing extremists that we need to be concerned about. But in fact, on the left, you have people who are practicing chanting the phrase "death to Israel" and certainly "death to America," getting ready to disrupt the Democrat National Committee, the Democrat conference this year. And you've got people chanting from the river to the sea to eradicate Israel on these college campuses. Extremism is now a very unfortunate feature of that party.
It is. They are hostages to Hamas, and you see Hamas and Iranian figures as well cheering on the campus protests. And why are the Democrats so reluctant to deal with the campus issue? Because they own the campuses. They own the campuses and the ideology of the faculty, the ideology of the students, the ideology of the administrators and the leaders, and then the donors of these schools. These are all Democrats. And as you noted, the Democrat dark money outfits that essentially are funding the groups that are really coordinating and orchestrating in a very professional way the campus occupations. This is what the Democrat Party is now in hock to. One aspect of the Biden policy is he wants to make the Israel-Hamas war go away because it is such a liability for him. He wants calm in the region. He doesn't want oil prices to spike to the extent Israel would strike in a meaningful way against Iran proper. And so he has all of these calculations, and he's trying to balance out all of these different competing interests. But the American national interest is not even a part of the picture. It's not even a part of the equation. And that is maybe the most extreme aspect of where the Democrat Party is.
Yeah, we see that in every single one of their decisions, from the border to Russia, Ukraine, to Israel and Hamas. It's just it's never ending. They never focus on what's in the American interest here, including the interest of getting those American hostages out of Gaza. Thank you very much, Ben Weingarten from Real Clear Investigations. Really appreciate our time today. Thank you, sir. And just to add on to one other point here that Ben Weingarten made about what's happening on these campuses across the country, the organization by the left, the outside agitators that are coming in many cases. You heard at the bottom of the hour news break, Heather Curtis share this detail. At the GW University encampment, when they arrested 33 people, the police department's only been able to confirm that 6 of them are students so far. 6. Who are the rest of them? Love to know the answer to that. Mike is in Sunshine, line 4. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, thanks for taking my call. This withholding of weapons from Israel, I think, is going to be a net loser for Biden. Why he's placating a very vocal Dearborn, he's going to lose, I think, a material percentage of, let's say, another voting bloc, let's say liberal Jews. It's going to be interesting to see the exit polling in November. He's going to be in trouble, but whatever Obama wants, I think he gets.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and you're also assessing correctly. He's ticking everybody off. May it show up in the actual election results, Mike? Thank you for that. Yep. I appreciate that. You know who I'm really looking forward to? I mean this with all sincerity, as I do each day. Is the great one. He's coming up next. Mark Levin, wonderful guy. We've got a lot of news for Mark to respond to today. Obviously, we rely on him for his legal assessments, big court cases today, and also what's going on overseas, Joe Biden cutting off Israel. Settle in. We've got a very interesting and informative 3 hours ahead. The great one, Mark Levin. And if you'd like to catch up on anything we did on this show today, the podcast, baby. The Vince Coglianese Show. Get the podcast. Share it with a family member. It'll bring you closer together. Have a great night.